Hello, Josette.
Hello, Matt. How are you, dearest?
Good. Are you sick of me yet?
No, not at all. I don't think it's possible. Still in creative love with you, so no, not going anywhere, dear.
Perfect.
I'm here.
Then this
I'm here
is
to
working
stay.
out nicely. We're working on a project for our ad agency together, and of course the podcast, and so it's just been zoom.
Oh my
for the
gosh,
last
we've been having a lot of delicious
weeks.
Zooms. Yes, we have.
Lots of Zooms. Yeah. Well, today was a fun one.
It really was. I really loved this conversation, actually. And Alexandra Chando, who we spoke to, director, actress, producer, founder of the Her Voice at the Mammoth Film Festival, is just such an inspiration. And she is so humble and so almost doesn't feel like she's aware of how incredible she is while we're having this conversation. Right. I'm like, wait, do you see yourself? She was just so wonderful to talk to and so generous with all of her information and wisdom and knowledge. I really love this chat.
Such a polymath in so many ways, she was a young, we should say, not necessarily a child star, but a young, star, in the sense that she was only a teenager when she started working really a lot in TV. And so to have that entire life happen so early and so quick for her, but then to find herself as a director and a producer and now running an aspect of a huge film festival, it really speaks to what a person's capable of when they open themselves up to all the possibilities of their creative life.
Yes, and that fully stepping into power and expanding your identity and definition of yourself. It's just, it's all the juice I love to talk about. Oh my gosh. Yes.
It's so good. And it's worth mentioning also just that throughout the conversation, she refers to someone named Tanner. We don't really cover what it is, but he's Tanner Beard. He's one of the founders of the Mammoth Film Festival. So going into this conversation with that knowledge, you won't feel left out.
Yeah, I think that'll be helpful. Yeah. Well, here we go. Introducing Alexandra Chando.
Hello.
Matt was literally just saying to me he needs to get me a baseball cap because we're wearing matching t-shirts today, and now you've arrived with your baseball cap. So the two of us together are syncing up.
The combination.
Well, thanks for letting me wear my baseball cap.
Oh my God, listen, anytime.
I see that you're fully in your closet.
Oh, fully. That's it. It's actually become a talking point that this is basically, I'm like the female version of Harry Potter for this podcast, and I do very well in this tiny little closet. So this is my comfy place.
Yeah, I love it.
If we ever get a studio of our own, we're still going to have Josette in a closet because it's become so much fun.
Oh my God, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the Makers podcast. We're so glad you've joined us, Alex. Oh my gosh, what an absolute treat to have you.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm so honored that you asked.
Well, obviously, it was a no-brainer because after being at the receiving end of your magic at the Mammoth Film Festival and seeing you in your just like grounded awesomeness is the only way I can think to describe it. Holding space in such a beautiful way and just being the most remarkable like champion for women, I guess, and champion for female filmmakers. I was just, Matt, we have to have her on and talk to this badass. So I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will say your email that you sent to me was so lovely to receive. And it just like, because, we have these moments where it's like, what am I doing? Are things even like, does it matter? Is it making a difference? Like, why am I doing this? Mm-hmm. And then you get an email like the one that you sent, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah. It all makes sense.
Oh,
so
it matters.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate that email. It kept me going.
Well, thank you. I mean, I can't imagine the amount of work involved in putting something like that together and running it with such effectiveness and so smoothly and just with so much passion and love. Like, it just has to be such a labor of extreme love. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, so I guess we just wanted to have you on and pick your brain and
Sure.
you know, on the Makers podcast, we talk about all things creativity and making, obviously. It's in the name. So we wanted to just dive into your creative process and your journey to getting here. So perhaps we can start at the beginning. How did you get here and to where you are as a maker?
Oh boy.
Dun, dun, dun.
Ooh, all right. I started very young. I was always doing, I mean, I started as an actor. So I was always doing community theater and high school plays and everything. And then I got a manager when I was 13, which is like a little unconventional, but it was one of those things where like my parents, I didn't have parents that like pushed me to do it, but they also weren't parents that weren't supportive. They were just really cool about it. And it kind of fell into my lap, the idea of getting a manager, because at the time, I was living in Pennsylvania. Where I lived is like an hour and 20 minutes outside of New York City. So back then, in what was it, like 2000, cattle calls to get managers and agents was still a thing. So like you would go and they would sign up like 15 kids and you would meet and kind of like filter in and out. And then that was how you got a manager. So they liked me. They ended up signing me. I had gone up to the city with a friend and it was just kind of like on a whim. And I started working from there. Like I booked a commercial and then I booked my first pilot when I was 16.
Wow.
The pilot for the WB when the WB was like still the WB.
Yeah.
When Dawson's Creek was on and everything. And,
did it go through or did
it didn't
did
get
it stop?
picked up? No,
Yeah.
it was a sitcom. And then just had a normal high school life after the pilot and started college. And then I booked a soap opera. My sophomore year of college, and I moved out of the dorms. I moved into the city at 19 and, you know, was off to the races. But I feel like all of my 20s, all I wanted to do was be an actor, and it came very easily. You know, I think after the success of like the soap opera, then I did a couple of other shows, and then I booked Lion Game, which was like the show that I did where I played twins. And it was that show that kind of made me understand what went into making a television show, because all the other jobs that I had, you know, I would be a guest star, I'd be recurring, and you kind of just like step in, you say your lines, you step out, you go to your trailer, that's it. And with Lion Game, I was on set, you know, I had 16-hour days. And so I would be on set with the guest director and the DP, and just, you know, I was the one that kind of helped steer the ship in the way of like, how do we make our day? How do we best make our day? And I had never thought of, you know, work that way. And I remember I was 25 and I used to get pissed at all the other actors who didn't think that way, who they would be like, hey, I don't think my character would walk in this direction. I actually want to make this turn, which then, like, as we know, adds another shot, which adds like another hour to your shooting day. And I'd be like, no, like, but it would bother me that they didn't understand that they were literally just thinking of like, in terms of being an actor and their character and their intention.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the first moment for me where I was like, oh, I think I'm different. And I think I kind of can do other things. And so I started shadowing. I met a bunch of directors through that show and became friendly with them, and they let me shadow. And so for me, it was kind of this like weird, slow transition, because at the same time, I was kind of hitting a weird age when Lion Game ended. I've always looked younger than what I am. Like, I'm 35 now, and it's nice that I look young, but it sucks that I look young because I lose out on a lot of work. So I always kind of like, after Lion Game, where I was 25, 26, playing 17.
Good.
I was like, I'm not playing high school anymore.
Yeah.
So then I kind of like, I booked a couple of pilots that didn't get picked up, but I fell into this gap of, well, I can't play 30s. I can't really play late 20s. There's not that much. Like, so I just like didn't have a place. And it's happening to me again as a 35-year-old woman. Like, I don't have a place because I'm not going to play 21, 22. And I don't look old enough to play like 30s. So I think out of that, and I'm grateful, I'm super, super grateful none of those pilots got picked up. I mean, in one way, it would have been nice to have that money, but
Sure.
but in a way, you know, I fully believe like things happen for a reason. And like, had I gotten on another series and been working, I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't have been with Mammoth Film Festival. I wouldn't have started shadowing. I wouldn't have had to make my own shit happen. And like, it would have just not been what it was. So super grateful, but like the industry changed me too. It kind of jaded me. And, you know, I kind of lived through like the influencer period where I would like sit in a waiting room and there was like a Vine star next to me auditioning for the same role to lead a show. And like, they would get it and I wouldn't. And it would be like, but it doesn't translate. So I lived through all of that too, which then got me like further and further away.
That was probably the point in time where I definitely exited the acting part, you know, was during that time. It wasn't for that reason per se, but it was very interesting time to go into a room, kill it, and then see who got it. And it's because their Instagram following or whatever it was massive. And so that they already had like an established personal brand that was going to be effective for marketing the movie or the TV show or whatever they were selling. But going back to what you were saying, we talk about this all the time, how grateful we are for the things that didn't work out. If I got everything I wanted as an actor in my early, you know, to mid 20s, it would just, my life would be so different. I'm sure that I'd be very happy and grateful for that, but I love my life now and I love the direction things are going now. And so having those quote unquote failures informed my life in a way that changed the direction completely in a way that I love so much. We talk about that all the time.
Yeah, totally.
Well, and it's so beautiful that you actually, that it's almost like that resistance or that stickiness is the thing that's actually causing your insides to expand in a sense, you know, because I mean, what's happening is your failure, let's use that term very loosely because I don't see it as failure. You're not moving forward in that path is kind of what's forcing you to go like, oh, who am I? Where is there more of me, you know, and how can I bring that into the world? I'm so fascinated by that actually. And I mean, I see it so much in you, Alex, so just watching you in the world and the way you moved around that festival. And I know like we don't get to see ourselves. So it's very often we don't get the reflection of it, but there's so much confidence and so much capacity in you for holding space and for curiosity that I think is so juicy. And it's so rare that you see it in people in such an obvious way. I think that's what just delighted me so much about meeting you and just being able to watch you do your thing. Like it's such a genuine curiosity that is so magnetic. I wonder if you could speak a little about that, like where that comes from and what have you done to sort of foster that in your journey?
I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily like a conscious thing. I think I just like hit a certain point. I've always been a pretty confident person in the sense of like, even in high school, I never really cared what people thought of me.
Oh, what a blessing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course I did in some capacity, but like, I think I grew up with older brothers and I think they really toughened me up and like they kind of made me a different type of person, I guess, if that makes sense. I feel like girls with brothers always kind of end up being like that. Yeah. But I also think that at a certain point, for me anyway, I will say I wasn't always like this. I went through a really bad breakup when I was 30. And it was like about the time where like I was testing for a lot of stuff and I wasn't booking and like I just hit this like really low in my life. And I really had to dig deep and work on my own self-worth because like I always kind of had, as a lot of people do, like self-worth and insecurity issues in that regard. And so I really felt like I stepped into my power in my early 30s where I was just like, I don't give a shit anymore. Like I am, you know, and I'm also confident in my abilities. But it's funny because like it's interesting when people notice it because I'm not doing it in an intentional way. It's like, you know, it's just kind of innate.
I feel like that's the magic though, right? Like I mean, I've said this to Matt so many times, but I feel like that the things that we are really good at, those things that people are usually wowed by, are usually the things that we don't even realize we do because they're just obvious to us, or they just kind of are who we are, really. So I'm sitting here being like, oh my gosh, it's so wonderful to see you be like that, but that's just you. So I guess that's wonderful. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was asked, a girlfriend of mine out in Austin, she runs this company, and she was like, would you give like a speech or a talk about how to, hold yourself in a room and like pitch and be confident and like all the steps that you take? And I was like, I don't really know how I write that curriculum. Like, it's just like, I just do it, like, I don't really have the advice to give you. Like, of course there's like those, like, the cliche advice, but I couldn't really pinpoint what it is exactly that makes me that.
Yeah. Step one, get punched by your brothers a bunch of times while growing up, probably. Oh, no.
It is interesting how the things that do come naturally to us, it's very difficult to create a systematic theology of it. It's like that. It'd be difficult for you to break down how do you do what you do in those soft skills. Those are very, very difficult. Some people have, it's a skill of their own to be able to digest it all, or put it together in an encyclopedic form or whatever. But on the other hand, you could easily say, break down how did we, the job of a director or the job of an actor on set, things like that you could certainly break down, because those are specific skills that you had to develop, whereas these other things just kind of developed sort of innately as you grew up, I suppose.
Yeah, and I also think the way I grew up and like being in the industry and for better, for worse, like after Lion Game got canceled, like I went into a deep depression and I really had to like figure out who I was. And, I think that, I don't know. I also think too, I will always say that when I lived in New York for those like very brief years, I was there probably like 4 years, it shaped me fully. Like, I lived by myself. I was super independent. I was super lonely. I was working and I was making money. I was on a TV show, but I was so lonely. And I would do a lot by myself. And there are moments now, 15 years later, that I have flashbacks of me like on the subway by myself, like running errands and having that like feeling of like, I'm alone. But I think it kind of made me who I am.
At that age too.
A little rough and tumble too.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, yeah, and at such a young age. I mean, I think it's wild to have that sort of that independence thrust upon you in a sense, where you are sort of forced to grow up in a way that most people, I guess, don't have. I mean, most people always have help and friends around there and family and a place, sort of like a net to catch you, if anything else,
Yeah.
I had that same thing.
I had my family, like they were only an hour and 20 minutes away. I would see them on weekends or whatever, but just like, it was because I fell in that space of like, I wasn't 21 yet. I didn't have a fake ID at the time. Eventually I got one, but like at that time I didn't. So like, I couldn't really go out. I would see people every now and then. And my friends were in college, like, an hour up on the subway in the Bronx, but like otherwise, I was alone.
It's so wild. I mean, in some ways, I feel like it's like a time to fall in love with yourself, because when you get to spend that much time by yourself, you really does. I mean, you get to become intimate in a way that I think most people don't have the opportunity to be, for sure. And especially as an actor, because we're having to use all of that stuff all the time anyway. When we're bringing things to the work, we effectively are using our life, So it's beautiful you had that time. I'm interested to know, like, so, you said you were watching and you were sort of taking in the set in a way that other actors weren't. Did you always recognize that as you were a director, or do you feel like that only came after you sort of started to relax the identity of being an actor?
It's interesting. I always thought I would be, or my mindset was always, I'm an actor who wants to be a director, or who's trying to direct. And the game plan for me was always, I will get on another show and then I'll just ask to direct an episode, and then that'll be my, I'll just do it here and there. And then again, because that never happened, And I really started to get more serious about directing because I loved shadowing, and I felt ready to like do my own thing. I felt like something switched in me. I actually remember this. This was a moment. It was fairly recent. It was like maybe 3 years ago. I was pushing really hard to do my own stuff. And then I went to see this woman who was like a psychic in LA.
Oh my God, I love that you just said that, because I do that every 6 months. Yes.
So this woman, she was like, you know, she went through the whole gamut, but like basically she said, you need to do breath work, and you need, because I had like, you know, what she called walls around my heart. Gee, I wonder why.
New York will give that to you too, by the way.
Yeah, right. But also like just years of rejection too.
No, of course.
Sure.
So she's like, you really need to do some breath work to like open up. And so we did this group class. It was the first time I'd ever done it. And I don't know if you've done breath work. Have either? Yeah. Have you done the 3-part breath where it's like, you basically end up, I mean, some people say it's better than like a mushroom journey or an ayahuasca journey, because you really kind of like latch on to something. I don't know.
Oh my gosh,
but
I need to try this 3-part breath.
Yeah, I used to go, I'll send you her information because she's in LA.
Yes, please.
But amazing, like breakthroughs, like crying, like screaming, the whole thing, right? It's because this woman was like, you don't just need like breath work. You need to like unleash some stuff within you.
Wow.
And so at the end of this breath work, I'm like crying, laying there with my eyes closed. And she's like, I want you to imagine getting like what you want. I forget what exactly she said, but ultimately for me, I had the scenario of being on a set. I was envisioning myself on a set and envisioning myself as the actor or the director, but I couldn't choose both. I had to only choose one. And so I said to myself, Alex, just pick one. And I went to director. And I broke down crying because I was like, whoa, like I feel like I just gave myself permission to sit in that director's chair and also know that I'm not failing because I haven't been working as an actor, but it's just a different path I'm going to take right now. And it doesn't mean that I won't always, you know, I'll never be an actor again, or I'm not, like, I still audition. Like I just had 2 auditions last week. It's not about that. It's just about like, right now, this time in my life, this is what my focus should be. But it was like giving myself permission because I've always identified myself as an actor. And so that flip for me was like, oh gosh, like, is this okay?
Yeah.
So now,
was there a fear of failure in there that was like holding you back? Was it just an identity that you weren't comfortable with at the time?
I don't know what it was. I think it was like I think there's like this ingrained programming from being an actor for so long of like, if you're not working, if you're not on a TV show, if you're not, because when your identity is so tied to being an actor and being a working actor and you're not working, there's so much shame around that.
There's so much shame. It's so toxic.
Yeah. And like being in LA, especially, like that's why I left LA. I was like, I got to get out. But being in LA just like makes it even worse because like people ask you what you do. And if you don't have a show that you're on, they're like, okay. You know, it's like this weird thing. Yeah. And so when I started telling people that I was a director, it changed the game for me because nobody said to me, oh, well, what have I seen you in? Or like, what are you doing? It would just be like, end of the sentence, period, done. I'm a director. Cool, let's move on.
We hope you love listening to the Makers podcast as much as we love making it.
And if you would like to show your support and keep us going and keep us making magic and bringing these gorgeous creative conversations to you, perhaps you'd consider becoming a contributor to the Makers podcast. If you'd like to do so,
visit anchor.fm/themakers/support to get started. And now, back to the show.
I mean, I've had a very similar journey as far as going from like the actor and being very identified with that and having success in that world, and then sort of stepping into this, sort of auteur position, writing, directing, and such. And it's fascinating because for me, I felt like and I hate to be like as a woman, but like honest to God, as a woman, like I never felt like I was allowed to be in that role. And I know we've had a few examples, we've had the, Catherine Bigelow's and the Jane Campions and stuff. And we've had a few examples through time, but when I came up into the industry, there were very few examples. And so for me, it was like woman equals how to be powerful as a woman was you be a movie star. That is the ultimate woman power, right? So like that was what I was mistaking being powerful as. And so for me, weirdly, it feels like it's kind of a systemic thing that was holding me back from acknowledging my place and my ability to step into power. And even now, I mean, that's why I'm so grateful for what you're doing with Mammoth and how you're championing, the rest of us and creating this kind of community around what you're doing, because it does still feel like I know we're moving forward and I know there's change, and my God, yes, just look at what's happened this award season. There's definitely change happening, but it still feels like I'm submitting a screenplay to a screenplay festival, and I know that most of the people probably reading those screenplays are men, and I know that when I'm not getting through to that finalist round, it's because they're not identifying with my lens, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done. And even just the sheer fact of like, the fact that I had this meeting not long ago with one of the executives over at Freeform.
Right.
And she was like, I said, I've shadowed like over 400 hours and, whatever. And she was like, what?
Yeah, that's wild.
Like, what's crazy is you have done all of your work and all of like, you've put in the time and there will be a guy, sorry, but there will be a guy who...
No, Matt is a champion, let me tell you. That's Matt. Why we do this together.
Put in a good word for me, Josette, please.
He really is not your average white man, I hate to say.
I wouldn't imagine that you would be sitting on this podcast if you weren't. But she said, there is going to be a man that comes in that doesn't have any of those shadowing hours, but will get the job before you.
Yeah.
And it's like, as women, we feel like we need to constantly overcompensate and prove ourselves and be ultra prepared and all the things. And like, we still can't get the jobs.
Yeah. It's weird. I think it is just, it's funny because I really do feel like it's just about a comfort. People go with what they're comfortable with and what they feel, confident in doing. And, Matt is actually, incidentally, he has hired me to direct a project for his advertising company. So we're actually working at the moment together. So please believe Matt is not one of those people.
No.
He is a champion. But yeah, there are, I mean, I think Matt, you're one of the rare examples. I think, it's taking, it's taking a lot of convincing and a lot of extra work, I guess.
Well, I think too, it definitely comes down to the individuals. I mean, we could talk about systemic, issues as well, certainly. But, I grew up, like my mom is really logistically minded and she's like super into details and math and all this kind of stuff. And so growing up, that's kind of all I knew was like, when you wanted to get something done, you went to mom, you know what I mean? And so you kind of had that. So I kind of always had that with me. Like my very first thing I ever wrote and directed, the executive producer of the whole thing was one of my best female friends. And she had the same mind, just this amazing, like mind who just produced the hell out of this thing. And it was like, so things like that just never occurred to me. I didn't realize how much it was because I'm so in my own, like world, of course, as the person that I am. So hearing the challenges that everyone does face, I would like to, obviously I don't shout it from the rooftops, but I want to counteract that as much as I can with my own company and give not just, and it's not even about giving opportunity. It's about recognizing skill sets and talents in everybody around us, whatever, whoever you are. That's very important to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
It's so is this where your idea of her voice at Mammoth Film Festival comes along? Is this part of your major push for sort of gender parity in the world?
I think so. Well, yeah, I originally came on to Mammoth because Tanner and Tomic wanted me to start their female filmmaker initiative. And at the time it wasn't her voice. We actually were sponsored our first year by Women in Film.
Oh, wow.
it was like a roundtable conversation, and I ended up saying I would do that. And then ultimately the first year, there's like five of us who are the original like team members who started the festival, and I ended up being the festival manager, and it kind of just like snowballed from there. And so in our second year, we actually tried to get Women in Film back to sponsor us, and they said no, which was crazy to us. We were like, and we can't figure out why, because like we had an amazing event, but it was a blessing, because then Tanner was like, well, then just start your own.
Oh my gosh.
Just do your own
I love
program.
him for that.
So, so that's where Her Voice came to be. And, you know, for me, it was always something, when I look at women in film, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but when I look at women in film, it feels very much like it's still a part of a organization, or it's an organization where like, even to be a member, memberships are very expensive. For me, at the time, I had applied to be in the WB Directors Program, and I had been employed by WB for like 8 years as an actor. I had amazing letters of recommendation. I had a great sample. And I didn't get into the program because they had said that the only way you get into the program is if you have a guaranteed episode to direct when you get out of the program.
That is absolutely outrageous. How are you meant to get that?
Then I wouldn't need this program if that were the case. So I got really frustrated, and I was like, if someone like me, who is very well connected because of my acting career, can't even get into these programs and can't get any sort of like accessibility in that way, then how is like Sarah from Idaho, who wants to be a director, ever going to have a chance? So I wanted to create something that created a little more accessibility. And, you know, it was, the whole game plan for it was supposed to be a little bit more LA focused, and then COVID happened and just kind of wiped it all out, because it's all live events, and I wasn't going to try and start something online. Like, it just was not for me. Yeah. So this past year was like the first year where we're able to kind of slowly get the momentum again. I'm going to do an event in Austin. We're going to try and do an event in LA. So we're going to try and pick up some steam. But for me, it was all about accessibility. Because like I said, you know, Women in Film is great. And even the one out here, but it is a podcast, but
no, that's fine. You can whisper on podcasts.
You're in Austin?
It's totally okay.
Yeah, I'm in Austin.
Oh, okay. Cool. I love Austin, by the way. I mean, I've only been there once, and it's for 3 days. I was there for the Formula One race in October.
That's a wild weekend to be here.
Yeah, well, I think there was a film festival happening that weekend as well, or something film related was happening as well.
I think Austin Film Festival.
Yeah, I think so. It was the most bonkers time to be in the city for the first time, but I loved it. It was so awesome there. Yeah,
it's a great place, and a great filmmaking community, which is why I came back. Because I shot my TV show here. We shot Lion Game here 9 years ago.
No ways, I didn't realize that. So, I mean, Alex, it's funny because, I mean, you said, obviously, by the way, I've run into exactly the same experiences with Women in Film. I mean, I have been an active member for years, and I've applied for probably every single thing they have available. I don't know how many letters and applications I've written, God knows what, never got in. It's just like I don't know why it feels like the doors are like ironclad or something. It's really strange. So it's so funny that you've basically are telling me now it would make so much sense, because it's like, well, yes, of course, that's exactly what you did. You opened up a door for talent to be seen, and it's so, I mean, my God, I am so grateful to you, because this is exactly, no, it's true, because I mean, it's just so beautiful that what Tanner's saying, like, just make it yourself. But yes, of course, make it yourself, because I think this is the thing, is when we don't see the thing we need in the world, and when you do have the bravery to champion something like that, it changes people's lives. I mean, my God, you know, the fact that my work was seen, and to be able to sit in a theater and have a full audience watch my work, I mean, holy heavens, you can't put a price on that, you know. It's just exceptional. So thank you, really. I mean,
you're welcome.
It is so meaningful what you're doing, and it is changing people's lives, and it's absolutely extraordinary. So what you set out to achieve, you have achieved, my darling. It's incredible.
Well, thank you. That really, really means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. And I'm really proud of the growth that we've had. I mean, you should have seen the first Her Voice shorts block our first year. It was like a lot to be desired because we didn't even have that many women submit. So it was just like kind of like scraping together whatever female filmmakers we had. And this last year, it was like remarkable. I sent my list to Tanner and I was like fighting him on some of them. I was like, no, this one is going to be in Her Voice.
There were, it was so incredible to sit and watch those films because there were so many beautiful pieces and it was so incredible to be able to meet the filmmakers and sort of hang out together and I guess, just share stories. And I love your idea of sort of community over competition. I think it's such a beautiful philosophy to have in the world. And, it was your response to my email that I sent and thanks to you after the festival where you were just saying, how for the longest time you felt like you were alone and now you're creating this community. And it's so important to know we aren't alone as artists, and to know that we have the support. So it's remarkable that you're doing that. Have you always sort of had that philosophy though? Have you always felt like, I know Matt and I have spoken about this idea of infinite possibilities in the world and there is no such thing as competition, but I know that it sometimes takes a little time to sort of realize that. It certainly took me time. Have you always felt that way?
No, I think I was always kind of one of those girls who had more guy friends when I was younger because girls were just nasty and I got bullied by my own girlfriends a lot of the time and went through like a series of different I think every year in high school, I had like a different group of girlfriends that I was with, but my group of guy friends stayed consistent. And so I was always really leery of female relationships. And I think, and I'm sure Josette, you could relate to this in the sense of like, at least for me, it wasn't until I hit my late 20s that because that's when you really start understanding yourself and who you are and like your needs and who you are as a person, that my relationship with women really changed. And I was able to kind of have better relationships and curate better friendships and groups of friends because I was more secure in myself.
Totally.
I'm in the camp now where like, if I have an audition and I read it and I think one of my girlfriends is good for it, I'll send it to her and say, hey, see if you can get yourself on tape for this. It wasn't always the case. I like to believe that I would have done that, but I think that it just didn't really cross my mind. And now I just feel like we have to support each other and we have to, champion one another. And I've now flip-flopped. Like I have more girlfriends than I have guy friends. I have a great group of guy friends in LA. They're my family. But like women in Austin, when I first came here, I met girlfriends right away and they're my support team. And I think we need that. But again, like it's not until you kind of hit a certain age as a woman that I think you are more open to that.
I think there's something too about like being in your power, you're telling a story, but I'm tracking along that like this has happened in a similar timeline to sort of when you stepped into your power. And I think it is when you are grounded in that way, I think what's yours won't miss you, and you have that sort of sense of what you bring into a room. And a friend of mine said it once, like you always have to think of when you're going to a party, what dessert you're bringing, or like what dish you're bringing to the table. You have to know that you bring a special dish and everybody brings their own special dish and you kind of can't cross over. Even if you both bring a potato bake, you're doing it different to the other person. So I think that's the thing is like when you get to that place where you sort of know what dish you're bringing to the party, then it doesn't matter, the party just becomes more delightful the more dishes we bring, really. We all need bigger jeans afterwards, but still, it's more delightful.
Very true. Yeah, it's very true. But it's hard. I think it's hard because there is a competitive nature to this industry. I feel like you still get the sense of like, it's so hard to get a job as it is. Like you have to keep that competitive edge. But I don't know. I think that what's right for you will be yours. And you know?
Absolutely. It really speaks to that level of going out and getting what you want. You know, that's when we're actors coming up, I always explain it to people who've never been in the industry, who've never like gone to an audition, and they're so blown away by how bizarre it is to go to, you know, just a normal audition and walking in and having, you know, in my case, it was all 5'9" guys who looked exactly like me, same haircut. It's just so bizarre to have these things happen. So it creates this interesting competitiveness where you don't even know these guys, but you know, I walk in, I don't like them already. And you just, cause you're already there on that level. But then when you come into, you know, yourself and your power and understanding what you have to offer as a person and begin creating opportunities for others on your own, it changes everything. It changed everything for me when I did that first web series. We did 6 episodes and it became this thing where I got to bring all my friends in and we got to do it and made great friends. And not only that, but now have seen some of the people that, you know, we hired throughout that time just go on to have amazing careers. And so getting to be a part of that is a different level of enjoyment in life and in the business. And when you can cut out that, I mean, it's okay to be competitive, and that's like, definitely there's an edge to certain aspects of it. But when it comes from a place of lack, that's when it's not serving you. As long as you think of it as an abundant world, competitiveness can be healthy in that respect, I think.
I think it takes a lot of self-work to get to a place where you celebrate your friends' successes genuinely, because I think when you all come up together, especially as actors, it's sometimes, you know, it's sometimes hard to feel that, like, not feel that like pang of envy when they book a job and you don't, especially if you are living in that place of like lack.
Oh my God, it can be downright painful. It can literally feel like a knife through your chest, you know? And I mean, I don't know why. It's the most bizarre thing, because from the other side, when you've done that work, like you're saying about it, it's like it is a heart-opening, joyful feeling, which is the complete opposite experience. It's so wild. Yeah,
but it takes a lot. It takes a lot, which is, I think, another reason why, like, I left LA. Like, you kind of hit, Matt, something when you said living in a place of lack. I went back to LA recently, and I was there for 10 days. And it was like the first long stretch of time that I was in LA since I had moved to Austin. And I started to feel this like heaviness by like day 2. And I was like, what is this feeling? And I realized that I have, at least the last few years, it was really hard for me to live in LA and not have a scarcity mindset and not live in a place of lack, because I was struggling financially. You know, like, I've run out of money before. I like wasn't booking, and then obviously the COVID of it all, but all of this stuff. And so it all started kind of coming in again that second day in LA. And I was like, oh my God, that's it. Like, I never feel like I'm enough here. Like, I feel like I don't have this house, or I'm not on this show, or like, I can be feeding myself affirmation after affirmation, but like right now, for my own like mental health, this place, I just don't drive with it right now, because it makes me feel like I am not enough, even though I fucking know I'm enough. Yeah,
of course you are.
You know,
so does everyone else, Alex, in case you doubt it any day. Just call me.
No, I will. But it's that material and the superficial and the bubble that we put ourselves in. And you know, I love LA for a lot of reasons, but it also wasn't good for me for a lot of reasons, and it affected my work and my art.
Yeah, it's wild. I've had to find Matt, you left LA too, but I've had to find like a little sort of safety on the east side here, where I feel like I have my little community of people who, you know, don't have plastic surgery and like, you know, extreme eating habits, and, you know, sort of still want to eat cheese boards on the weekend and have a glass of wine. And I feel like that, you know, that feels like, okay. I feel so, well, you need to come hang out with my people when you come back to LA, Alex.
No, I have a good group. But yeah. Wait, I just saw this, what was it, Overheard LA? And they posted, there are 10 million people in LA, but only 4 faces.
It's so terrifyingly true, though. That's the thing. I'm like, oh God, it's so scary. Yeah, I mean, that's why it takes a lot for me to go to Beverly Hills. I have a dentist there, and I think that's the only time I go is when I need to go and get a cavity filled. Then that's it, you know.
That's a good place to have your dentist, though.
Yeah, exactly. Any doctor of mine is in Beverly Hills. Everybody else is.
Exactly.
There was a point in time in which, well, I mean, we all were waiters at some point in time or something like that, you know. And
we were.
it was a banquet area in this restaurant. It was in Westwood, pretty, you know, fancy little spot. And it was, I don't know, 50s to 70s old ladies, and they all had just all the cat work done on their face.
Oh God, you said cat work.
And one of the presumably the women in there, like I would guess their daughter maybe, came in with her baby and like 3 or 4, and she sets the kid down and says, "Go to grandma," and the kid didn't know which one was grandma because all their faces looked the same.
They all look the same.
And us waiters were like standing there with our water. We're like just mouth dropped. Couldn't believe it was funny. So it is kind of true.
It's so true, and I have so much compassion for it because I just know, I know that it does come from this place of just not enoughness, and you know, and it's so hard. The city is so hard for that because it is. You kind of in these circles that I don't know. I feel like we all have thresholds for things, and when that threshold gets crossed, it's like, and you're in, you know, and I'm doing that thing that I said I was never going to do, and I'm suddenly doing this thing, because I feel like these are the things that we think we have to do in order to be powerful, lovable, worthy, you know. It's so great that you figure that out though, and that you know that this is not the city for you, that you have this place that where you can kind of retreat to and make your art and be powerful and do your stuff. It's incredible that you figured it out so early in your life.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was in LA for 14 years, so.
Yeah, but still.
But I actually, when I was prepping, when we were working on Mammoth, because before the festival, I went and I lived with Tanner for a month. And he's in the Toluca Lake area. And it was, I mean, that place is such a bubble. So it actually, I was like, if ever I move back to LA, I'm moving to Toluca Lake, because it actually felt like I was okay. Yeah. And anytime I stepped out and went to visit a friend in like West Hollywood or, you know, the Melrose area, I would be like,
Yeah, West Hollywood, but it does. It has that charge, though. I mean, for people that are sort of energy sensitive, it definitely has that charge. There's like a gripping desperation that I feel when I drive through West Hollywood. Yeah,
you just
that's why I kind of go around. To be
validated.
I go around. I get onto the freeway and drive right around.
It's so interesting though, because I had the exact same experience after moving to Colorado. And I had been doing the day job for a while and everything was fine. And I went back for like a friend's birthday party. And it was maybe like 1.5 years, 2 years in or something. And it was the first, and it was exactly that same feeling. Was I realized that my sense of lack was so tied up in the city, because you would drive around and see everyone driving crazy cars and everyone's doing better, quote unquote, than you, and fancy restaurants and all this stuff that you can't afford because you're just trying to, you know, get gas I certainly ran out of money at times. And so when I went back, I had this experience where I had rented a car. I was at the rental thing, and for whatever reason, I didn't call the bank or whatever. The card got declined the first time. Well, when the card gets declined and I'm in LA and I'm trying to rent a car to get somewhere, it took
Trigger
me
City.
down. It was Trigger City. So, but thing is, at the time I was working with a coach and I, shot her a text and she like gave me this whole list of things to do. But I completely I know exactly what you were feeling, going back and understanding that so much of that. So now it's a matter of retraining that it wasn't that the city was providing a sense of lack for me. It was my own feelings around living there. And now we're working on this project together and coming at it from a place of abundance at all times, and the excitement that I have of being able to get to go back to LA and shoot this project. Basically retelling the story is essentially what I'm after. So cool.
That's really cool. It's like you're like repatterning or reprogramming your brain.
Sure.
But it's tough. It's a tough
It really
place
is
to be in.
So tell me about this. Not to segue too quickly, but because we could talk about LA for a full hour and a
Yeah,
half.
I know.
Let me tell you, we have a lot of
We'll do an
stories to
LA
tell
podcast.
people.
But yes, what?
I'd love to know about the Sony Diverse Directors Program, which was so thrilling to see you post that news on Instagram. I literally was like,
Thank
oh my
you.
God, yes, when I saw it.
I know. I was very excited. So I had applied to the WB one and then kind of was embittered about it because of, the politics of it all. And so I applied to Sony, and it was just, I directed a pilot that actually I screened at Mammoth.
Amazing.
It's called NSFW, and which is a heartbreaking story because we didn't end up taking it out and pitching it, which is like,
No, why?
I know, it's a whole thing. I'll tell you about it.
I really want to see the link. Please, will you send this to me? I definitely want to watch
I'll send it to you. Yeah, it was a heartbreaking situation, but I've been able to use it as a really good sample because it is a pilot of a series. So yeah, I applied, and actually my interview, I made it through the interview round, and the interview was like during Mammoth. So I had to like sneak off to a hotel to like have the interview with the SVP of programming over there at Sony. But yeah, it's this year they said it was the most competitive because it's virtual. So it was worldwide, and they accepted 15 people.
Holy
Wow.
shit. This is so amazing.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so it's set to kind of put you in the pipeline of the Sony system for TV. And, there's no guarantees. You just kind of have to, just like with everything, make your own way and use those connections that you make and just try and get your own episode. But yeah, it's really cool. And I already see a difference in like people saying, oh, you got into the Sony program? Oh, okay. So I'll set you up with this meeting. And I'm like, the same person,
so annoying.
I had the same work,
It's
I did
so
the same
annoying.
shit. Like, it's just that I have this now.
Yeah.
But that's the name of the game, right?
It is. Yeah. It's weird how people just need that sort of anointment on your head, and then suddenly it's like, okay, now you're hot shit. Everyone wants to meet you. Yeah, bizarre.
Yeah.
Either way, this
exactly.
is a wildly amazing thing. So is this ultimately the dream? Like, if I know we did the breath work and we figured out that it was directing. I am the director, damn it. Is this the dream though, TV directing? Or do you feel like you always want to bounce between film and television?
Both. I think because I kind of grew up on TV, and TV is just the world that I really understand, the pace and the budget and all of that. I've always just wanted to, I guess the easy response would be like, oh yeah, it just made sense that TV would be what I would want to direct. And I also feel like once you get that first episode and then your second episode, like the floodgates kind of open and then you have steady work. And so that for me was always, there's a sense of stability there, which I've never really had.
Yeah.
So that obviously is really exciting for me. But then also, I'm attached to direct my first feature in the fall. And so that's something that I'm like I'm super excited about and feel like, okay, I can do my own thing. The ultimate goal, I think, is eventually I'd love to be a producing director on a TV show. And like a short one, like 10 episode season, not like a 22.
Not trying to 22 it. Yeah, no thanks.
No.
Yeah.
So then I can either direct a feature or I can go act in a show or act in a feature, like I want to get married and have kids and have a family. So that's like obviously something else that I have to factor in.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I did as an actor that really was detrimental was I kind of had blinders on. I feel like I had one path and one path only. And I think I missed a lot of things. And so one of the things that I kind of promised myself the last few years is like to remove the blinders and be really open to whatever opportunities come. And just kind of see where it takes me. Obviously, I have my standards, and obviously, I know what I want and what I don't want, and what's like intuitively not for me. But I've noticed a huge change. Like even Mammoth coming in, I never thought that I would be the festival manager of a film festival. Like that wasn't even on my radar. So just to even say yes to that, and then, you know, meeting all these amazing people and kind of having those doors open, like the feature that I am directing was written by Suzanne Weiner, who,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, who, you know, she and I met. She did my first Women in Film when it was Women in Film. She did the first event the first year, and we've been like buddies ever since. She lives in Austin. So like she and I produced her short for her that world premiered at South by, and then she just directed something that I acted in. She like wrote it for me to act in.
Oh my gosh.
And now I'm directing her feature that she wrote. So like we've just kind of been doing this thing, and it's been great so far.
Look at you playing with your woman friends. Alex,
I
this is
know.
amazing. I love
But
that.
that's what it's about, right? Like just trying to figure out ways to like work with each other and you know.
It's
Year of the
amazing.
yes, that's what I've been trying to say. Like 2018 was the first year I was like, this is the year I say yes to all the opportunities, and I just kept on doing it. And now it's gotten to the point now where I get to say no every now and then, and not in a bad way. I get to actually start to sort of procure exactly what I want to say yes to now, and it's quite a shift in perception. That narrow lane that I was in, as it had to be acting or nothing, to I wish I had figured this out when I was 25 instead of, you know.
Oh my gosh, who are you saying this to?
But at the
Let me
same
tell
time,
you the same wishes for me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, grateful to be, because I feel like I just became conscious, you know, only a few years ago, of really understanding who I am and what I'm doing here. How did Mammoth come into your life in the first place?
I had known Tanner for now it's like 10 years, but I had known Tanner for a while because I met him. One of the guys who did Lion Game was best friends with Tanner.
Right.
His name's Ryan. And he introduced me into that group. And those are my guy friends now till this day. You know, that's family. And so I was at a barbecue at Tanner's, and he was just, and I knew there was like rumblings of a film festival, and I was just sitting there, and I was like, hey man, like, I don't have a lot going on, and I always love to learn things. And so if there's any like space for me to just come on board and help out or whatever, just let me know. And it was like it was right after the time too that I had kind of committed to myself to start saying yes to more and to being more open and putting myself out there, because I tend to be, my default can be shy. Like I'm an introvert, as much as it doesn't seem like I am sometimes. Like I'm totally an introvert, and I tend to be very shy. But yeah, I just kind of said that. I remember I was like sitting on his couch in his family room, and he was like, yeah, okay, cool. And then 2 days later, him and Tomik called me over to the house, and like we had an official meeting, and they were like, so what would you feel about starting a female filmmaker initiative? And I was like, great, sounds good. And then I helped kind of produce a little, you know, the thing that plays before the movie?
Yes.
The little vignette with like the people running around the woods. We shot that like our first year, and I was there to help and everything.
No
and then like
way.
from that point on, I like hit the ground running and became more involved with the festival, and the rest is history.
That's great.
Yeah. I don't think they knew what they were getting when they signed me up. I think they were just like, yeah, you can just do this. And then I was like, no.
You knew. They
you
didn't.
don't know who I am.
That's so great. Well, I should mention too, we've been thinking about renaming this podcast. Matt Jackson's done a play with everybody.
Oh my God. Yes. We have to name it that.
It's so funny because when Mammoth had happened and Josette won the award and everything for A Shame, I saw this guy named Tanner Beard liked it. And I was like, who's Tanner Beard? So I was like, I think I know him. So I clicked in. And I messaged him on Instagram. We'll have to connect at some point in time. He and I did a play together in my first year in LA.
Whoa.
It was a pirate musical.
Oh my God. By the way, the most interesting play you've ever mentioned on this podcast. A pirate musical.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I can envision this.
Yeah. My character had no legs and no hands, just 2 hooks, wore 2 eye patches, and rolled himself around in a little cart. It was so insane.
God. And were you guys singing? Actually, it was a proper musical?
Oh yeah. No, it was a real
Matt.
musical. I had to learn how to tap dance and everything. So
how did you tap dance with no legs?
it was a dream sequence that my character had, that suddenly he had arms and legs and he could.
Got it.
It was high level stuff.
Where was this performed?
So I can't remember the name of the theater. It was upstairs at the strip mall on La Brea.
Oh my was at a strip mall.
I feel like at a strip mall. This gets better.
This bar called The Woods is there, and it's actually a really cool bar.
Yeah,
you remember that? You know that
all the time with my ex-boyfriend.
So above there is a theater. Yeah,
I know,
it's
that
insane.
Is so wild.
But the theater also doubled as a meeting place for AA meetings.
Oh my gosh, this is more absurd.
So we come in
it sounds
after
like a
the
movie
meeting.
script.
And we'd be kicking like little tiny like airplane bottles around as we walked in, because they clearly weren't taking their meeting very seriously.
Oh, wow.
And it was the most insane thing I'd ever done. It was super fun though. It was actually so much fun, and the cast was great. And that's where I had met Tanner, and but we kind of lost track. I mean, this has to be like 2008 or something.
Alex, I feel like you're getting good information to hold against Tanner in the future. The time
ask him next time you chat. Just ask him about this musical, this pirate musical.
The funny thing is it's like I'm not even fazed by it. I'm like, Tanner being a pirate, yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think he was the bad guy. Like, he was kind of the bad guy pirate. I don't remember. Are there
good pirates?
Bonkers.
That is so ridiculous. Oh my gosh.
It was nuts.
Well, there you go. All right, add it to your list.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have to talk a little about your creative process and how you're nurturing your creativity. I think just because we have listeners who are wildly interested in creativity and how us mad artists do what we do. So I'd love to speak a little about for you to speak a little about what you do to take care of your creative process and I guess nurturing is the right word. Yeah.
I think it varies because I go through stints of feeling zero creativity whatsoever. And I oftentimes feel like my creativity isn't sparked until I have something specific to work on, because I am not a writer. And I know, being creative doesn't mean that you need to be a writer, but like, I feel as though I am in my most like creative zone when I am specifically like working or prepping a project or developing something with somebody. I feel like it doesn't really just like free flow for me. Yeah. Which I think I will say, like, I'm a very almost split down the middle of I'm super type A and I'm very organized and like have that kind of producer brain. And then also I'm a creative, but like, I think I lean more for the most part towards the more rigid. So it's actually work for me to unleash my creativity. If that makes sense.
That's so interesting. Absolutely. So what are you doing to do that? I mean, do you have tools, or how are you accessing that?
I read a lot. Like yesterday, I just read a book in one sitting, and it was like a 250-page book. Like,
oh my gosh, woman, that's
love wild. To read. So that always sparks my creativity and makes me feel like, I think where I am the most creatively inspired is looking at other art and watching other art and reading other art. I remember during COVID, I painted and colored. Like, I was coloring every day. I was watercolor painting and I was reading like crazy. And so I get filled up creatively by the external stuff coming in instead of me kind of like outputting. The only time I really feel like I output is when it's something that I'm working on specifically. But yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I again, it's one of those things where like, I don't consciously think about like my creativity. It kind of just happens. It's just kind of there. I'm always seeing things and thinking like, oh, that's a really cool shot, or, I'll watch a show and I'll like take a video of it and like, you know, put it in the bank. And today I was like driving and I looked to my left and there was a cemetery, and it's bluebonnet season here. And so there's bluebonnets everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
There's an old cemetery with all these bluebonnets, and I pulled my car over to the side of the road and I got out and I started taking pictures. Like, you know, it's just stuff like that that's like more inspiration for me instead of like outputting some kind of creativity.
It's interesting because it sounds like, I mean, it's what I was saying earlier about your curiosity. It just sounds like you're taking the world in a very meaningful, deep way that I suppose is just facilitating your creativity. So it's obviously not something you're conscious of, but not everyone's going to pull the car over and take photographs of something beautiful. You know, I think that's, or even see it, dare I say, you know, I mean, that's really incredible that that's how you're looking at the world.
I've always been an observer, even in friendships or even just like in groups. I think that's kind of what makes me a little more shy is because I just like to observe. I observe people. I like to, it's not judging them. It's just like, I like to think I'm a good judge of character, and it's because of how I observe people and like what they do. But even just the world too, like you said, you know, I see things and I'm inspired by them. But yeah, I don't know. I get down on myself because sometimes I feel like I'm not being creative or doing creative things. But I think that's a really bad trap to get into. Like just because we're artists doesn't mean we need to be creating all the damn time. Like there's you can have spurts.
Absolutely. I think that, I don't know if this is for you, but it sounds like you're getting all this inspiration constantly, and you're taking in, you're observing, and then it has to hit a threshold before you then output what's going on. Like you have to feel like you're really in the zone and ready for that. And something we talk about a lot is, and we always want to ask is, where does it come from though? Where does your creativity come from? We talked about, is there a muse? Is it inside of yourself? Is it the universe? Where do you think your creativity comes from?
It's a good question.
It's one of the most annoying questions. Right? Let's just say it's one of the most annoying questions because I can't find the answer. And I keep asking everybody because I'm desperate to know. Yeah. I think everybody is creative in their own way, right? Like, and there's a spectrum of creativity. Like, you know, my brother, for example, he builds homes. Like, he's not creative in the way that I know creativity. He's not an artist, but he's an artist. Like, he's creative because he can, you know, draw a home, like draw, you know, have drawings and like understand construction and like all of that. And so I think there's just different types of creativity. But I also think like, and maybe I think it's hard to pinpoint it with myself because like when I look at other people, I can see that they were like blessed with a gift, right? Like I see talent. I kind of like, I guess it's like talent, but you know, when you have a writer who's just like a really good writer and it just flows out of them and it's easy and they can come up with a story like that. It's a gift, you know, like I think songwriters, people who can write a song, like that's a gift that you're like, I can't do that. And so I think we're all blessed with these gifts. And it's just a matter of whether we tap into them. But like for me, again, like I don't necessarily, I think I almost like have to check myself every now and then because this is the only way I can describe it. And this isn't creativity, but I was talking to my friend the other day and we were talking about like really doing the work on ourselves and really kind of like digging in and asking the hard questions. Because I was saying, I remember when I was going through my breakup, it was like so painful. And like, I had to do so much work. And I got to the place where the work felt like it was done. Like I felt like I was healed. I was in a great place. And there was a part of me that was like, well, now what? You know, it's like all you want to do is get to the end where you feel good. And then you feel good and you're like, oh, but now what do I do? Because I just like did all this work. And so
in my mind, I was saying to him, I was like, it just comes really innate in me. I always want to dig and really try and find ways to better myself and ask the hard questions. And he was like, not everybody's like that, right? Like, people don't do that. And so it was almost like, I almost forgot that that's just like innate in me and that's not like the rest of the world. So in a way, it's kind of how I view creativity, where it's like, oh yeah, it's easy for me to like imagine this shot and to kind of like, because it's very intuitive and it's just like what I know. But I don't realize that it's not how everybody thinks.
Yeah.
Like not everybody can look at like a cemetery and say, oh, this would be a great shot. This would be a great opener. We could do this, whatever. That's just not how their brain works. So that was a really long-winded way of kind of answering your question, but I hope you understand.
No, I do.
Oh, yeah.
I do understand.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because it by definition, I guess it makes you an excavator or like a miner of treasures in a way, like you're just invested in mining instead of, sort of having it occur to you or whatever. It's like I like this idea of digging and this idea of it being sort of in you. And it's just something that has to be revealed. I think that's really beautiful, actually. Because it also means that, everyone has access to it because it's inside of all of us then, by virtue of us being the same. I love that.
I think so.
I love that.
I think about the people who say they're not creative, right? Or who say they don't have any creativity and they're all numbers people or finance people or whatever. And you kind of just like, there's the moment where you kind of feel bad for them because you're like, you're wrong. Like you are creative. You were creative when you were a kid. You had something that you did that was super creative and you just don't know how to tap into that anymore. So it's not that you're not a creative. You just aren't tapping into it and allowing yourself like to be open to that creativity.
And don't you feel like our definitions of what creativity have become so narrow? It's like, I think because of education and schooling and structure, we love to kind of put labels on things where we're like director, writer, actor, painter, violinist. And it's like, and if you're not creating in one of those little boxes, then you're not creative. But it's bullshit. You can make a beautiful meal, and put ingredients together in a way that it wouldn't occur to me. And I find that wildly creative.
Exactly.
I think there's nothing more wonderful than being on the receiving end of a beautifully cooked meal or, I don't know, a lovely greeting card. I mean, my gosh, people do that. Like there's just so many ways to be creative in life that I think we just don't recognize as that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, the creativity thing is so interesting because of that, because you get a lot of people who are maybe numbers people or whatever else. And when you hear that phrase, I'm not creative, it's you have to be creative to be good at math, to be good at all of those sorts of things. It's problem solving. Really is all creativity is it's problem solving. From point A to point B, how am I going to get the shot? How am I going to get the performance? How am I going to whatever that is? That's very much problem solving. It's like what is the movie Ratatouille? It's like everyone can cook. I'm so adamant about everyone is creative and great ideas can come from anyone.
Oh my gosh,
and anywhere.
Totally.
Yeah,
they sure can.
Totally. And I think too, like we all have our special gifts. Like I have a friend out here who couldn't tell you what he does, something with money and numbers and finance. But he just got promoted and he was so excited. And it was like, he sat and he had to figure out, like works for Salesforce or something. And he had to figure out some some massive number thing that they had to do. And he was so excited about it. And I was like, it's so crazy that you're excited about this. This is that's his gift. Like that's that's his purpose, and he doesn't really understand what I do. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
God, it's so fascinating.
It's so interesting because we know what it takes to make a movie or a commercial or whatever from start to finish, but it's a complete mystery to the vast majority of the population. And so to know how much technical stuff goes into it, it's just the same as anyone else's job. The numbers don't just appear. He's got to dig in and he has to use his skills to get it there. Same thing with making movies or whatever. Everybody has their lane and we all cross over all the time and everything, but eventually it's a miracle that any movie gets made because of that, because of how much it takes to dig in and make it happen.
Gosh, it's so true.
I'm having conversations about this movie that I'm doing, and I met with an investor, and she wanted a finance plan. And I spoke to another producer, and we were a very, reputable producer who has been doing this for years and years and years. And he was saying all these terms like, well, you can get a backstop, and then you can, like stuff that you just don't ever come across. Like, even as a creative producer, you're just like, oh. And it's been really interesting because a part of me like hates it and doesn't really care about it. And even just looking at the budget, like I had to call Oklahoma, like the IATSE branch of Oklahoma, just to see like what their rates are. And I didn't even know that like different states at different rates.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
You just learn so much and you're thrust into it. And a part of you feels like really dumb because you're I had no idea. But then the other part is like, oh shit, I should know this. Like at the very least, like surface, know that these are options. So it's really been an interesting few weeks where I've been having to try and like figure it out on my own, but also have been asking a bunch of other people because like, it's kind of hard to figure it out on your own. Like, where do you even start? It's not like there's like, there's resources, but it's been great because ultimately it's just going to make me a better director to know all of that.
Of course. It is so wild. It's like a maze. It's like a maze when you start talking financial stuff. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm like, let me deal with the creative.
Debt and equity and foreign sales and like.
Oh my God.
Somebody said MGs to me and I was like, yeah.
She's just going to Google it real quick. Yeah, it's so funny because, I mean, I've started during COVID because of COVID, I suddenly was like, oh, wait, the world is a global village, so I can make movies anywhere. So I started a company in South Africa and I'm developing a slate with a producing partner out there just because I'm like, why not? Like there's government financing. Like, why wouldn't I be just, expanding the opportunity to sort of develop stuff? But yeah, I mean, then you start talking about different territories together having negotiations and like it's absolutely wild co-productions between the UK and Ireland and South Africa and this and that. I'm like, oh my God, this is so confusing, and tax rebates and God knows what else. It's just it's a whole zoo. It's a whole zoo. So yeah,
I
feel
you put on your big girl business pants and you're like, all right.
Yep. Oh my goodness. Well, so I wonder in closing, because this has been the most delicious conversation and I've just loved connecting with you. It's been so wonderful to hear all your amazing wisdom and just, listen to your journey. I'd love to know if you have any tips for those people out there who are wanting to either follow a similar path or just be a little more creative in their life. If there's anything that sort of instantly occurs to you to say like, hey, do this, what would it be?
I think for me, one of the biggest things that has made an impact in my life is relationships. There's no way around it. I was very fortunate in my 20s to have met a lot of people in the television world where I have still kept up with. Now, I think that's one of my better qualities where I can really foster relationship and keep in touch with people. I mean, I keep in touch with people that I met 15 years ago and check in. It's been really important to me and it's been really important to my career. I think that is a key because as we all know, it's like who you know and who could potentially say, who can vouch for you or who has an opportunity or, any of those things and who wants to collaborate. So I think for me, that's been a really key facet, especially with shadowing. And, I think when you're your own advocate and you're your own, like, I hated school, right? Like I hated being in school, but because I love directing, I wanted to give myself the best education that I could. And so I devoured every book and I shadowed 400 hours and all of those things that I was able to do for myself. You just have to be a self-starter. But in order to be a self-starter that's like actually starts moving, you also need those relationships to help kind of like get you to the next, your next point. And but that's also like, you have to be really passionate. Like people always ask me, they're like, well, what do I do? How do I be an actor? And it's like, look, if you want to do anything else, go do that, because it's not fun sometimes, you know, it's a rough life. Like it's really hard and it's heartbreaking. And so if you don't love it, like go do something else. If you do love it, that's amazing. And I honor that, but it's, you know, it's a lot of work, and, go figure out how you can make money otherwise. Like in the meantime, you know, like that's one of the things that I'm like, oh, man, I really wish I learned a trade. So when I wasn't working, I could like go and, you know, be a plumber or something.
By the way, people would have been delighted if you were the person that showed up to fix their toilet. Can you imagine? No, but you know, that's a big stressor. And I think like it really hinders our creativity. Like I think that's the other thing that I struggled with for a while, is when you don't have money and when you're stressed about money, it's impossible to be creative. Well, Liz Gilbert said that, and I mean, I'm obsessed with her book, Big Magic. It's just such a delicious read. But she says that, you know, that you shouldn't put that kind of pressure on your creativity. So you shouldn't put the pressure on your creativity that it has to pay your bills, because it squeezes the life out of it, you know. So she said for the longest time she would wait tables or do whatever she had to do so that she could afford herself the space and the luxury of creating, you know, until, you know, well, spoiler alert, it worked out well for Liz. But, you know, I guess that's the thing is, you're right to say that that stressor, I think, adds a certain thing onto creativity that I think it's not helpful.
No, I think it was also really hard for me too, because when you have a lot of success younger and then you run out of money after the success, you kind of have this moment where you're like, well, I'm not going to go wait tables because I just had my own TV show. So like, that's not going to happen. So then you're kind of put in this position of like, well, what the fuck do I do?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and that happened to me. You know, and that also too is kind of what made me get a little scrappier with like directing and producing and, you know, even now, like I'm producing something that I'm getting paid for, and that's like my supplemental income.
Yeah. It's incredible.
But it's still not easy. You know, I'm still not where I want to be. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's many different paths too. That's the other thing. There's so many different ways to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always believed that success begets more success, and it doesn't have to be all in the same lane. You know, you can find, and whether it's career or financial or whatever that success looks like to you, there's ways to, you know, signal to the universe that you're very, very serious and that you're willing to do whatever it takes to get to the point where you want to be. And sometimes that requires many, many different paths that all eventually, you know, converge on the one that you want. But you do have to sort of be flexible. And that's the thing I wish I had learned when I was a kid or younger, you know, is to be flexible with the success and be okay with finding success in other avenues before finding the one that you really wanted.
Totally. Well, it creates momentum too, right? And it, like you said, it kind of signals to the universe, like that energy. It's more of an abundant energy and like a free flow. Like there's nothing better than, and we talked about this at the panel in Mammoth. It's like, I think Katie and Maria were saying, it's like when you're in that flow, you start to feel like things are coming and it's like when you move to a new place, like when I first moved here and I was saying yes to everything, like everything was just free flowing and you're just like, yeah. And then of course that doesn't last forever. So you always kind of have to like reignite that for yourself. And that's like what you're saying, Matt, is like, then that you do that by doing other lanes, you know, you find other ways.
Yeah.
Well, this momentum is definitely very obvious from the outside looking in at your life. And you're such an inspiration, Alex. Honestly, thank you so much for this time. I know time is such a precious commodity. So my gosh, we're so grateful you gifted us with this. And
yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, anyone looking for a bit of permission to be flexible with their identities and expand themselves into more power, I think that this was definitely the conversation to give them that little pink slip. So signed and sealed. Thanks to Alexandra Chando. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you both.